Welcome back and welcome to our chapter 20 lymphatic system and lymphoid organ tissues. So, we are now going to discuss an organ that doesn't feel like or look like an organ to most students simply because they are not as wonderful as the heart or the blood, or maybe and the blood's not even an organ, it's a tissue, or the cardiovascular system. But the lymphatic system really is part of your wonderful body. To give you an idea of what the lymphatic system do is, I always give my students an introduction to what it does. If you could recall every morning or in the middle of the night or very early in the morning when you wake up being sluggish. You look at yourself in the mirror and you look at your puffy, almost inflamed face. You cannot walk really very well, and you feel not really achy, but you feel tired. Now, why is this so? Why is it that your body feel like this whenever you wake up early in the morning? Why is it so hard really to be as active as you are, like in the middle of the day? Well, while you are sleeping, a lot of your body fluids inside your blood, your cardiovascular system, will not be moving as much as when you are moving in the middle of the day, when they're actually inside the arteries and the veins. When you are sleeping, some of the plasma will leak out and would leach into the tissues, and it takes time for them without any movement. It takes time for the lymphatic system or for this beautiful system to take back the fluid in your body. So I already spilled the beans. That's already the function of your lymphatic system. Your lymphatic system will make sure that your body fluids would stay where they are supposed to be. They're not supposed to be all in the tissues, but they will stay in the tissues for the most part if you are not going to be moving. So the milking effect of the muscles will pretty much like help your lymphatic system reclaim the body fluids that is leaked out into your tissues, put them back into the lymph, and then deliver them back into circulation. There are other things that the lymphatic system does. It's not only reclaiming the fluids. You have specialized cells in the lymphatic system that we will um, work on and would discover and would know pretty much at the end of this particular chapter how valuable they are. And then we get into chapter 21 next week, and you will find out more about what these little cells of the lymphatic system would do to help us in our defense. Okay, let's start. The lymphatic system would return fluids that leaked from the blood vessels back to the blood and would have three networks that would altogether work. You have the network of lymphatic vessels, and these are your lymphatic vessels, and pretty much your lymph, which is actually the fluid that is inside and is flowing through your lymphatic vessels, and the lymph nodes. There you go. Those are no, the ones that are pointing out, I'm sorry, is actually your venous and arterial system. The lymphatic vessels are those little tiny vessels. So the fluid will be reclaimed by these little tiny vessels and would pass the fluid into the lymph nodes, so they're going to be filtered off and then will be returned into the subclavian vein, the left subclavian vein. and then it will again go around in circulation. But then when you are not going to be moving around, it goes back into the tissues. It's going to be reclaimed again by the vessels, and then it will again be returned into circulation. So you have the network of lymphatic vessels. It's all over our body. Then in the lymph, the interstitial fluid, once it enters the lymph, becomes one the interstitial fluid, once it enters the lymphatic vessels, will become the lymph. Then you have your lymph nodes. These are structures that would house the lymph and would cleanse it. The lymphatic vessels offer a one-way system. It is only one way, and it ensures that the lymphatic that the lymph will go into the left subclavian vein. The lymphatic capillaries are actually blind-ended vessels that would weave in between the tissue cells and blood capillaries. So these are just like capillaries. They are just like the venous system. They're like veins, as a matter of fact. They are collapsible. And here's actually the end of your lymphatic vessel. The lymphatic system is not like your circulatory system that goes in circulation. They go around and there's no end to it. It goes around. This one will be open-ended. Okay, it would be similar to capillaries, but it is actually more permeable, and they are made up of endothelial cells, and they have very small valves. And one very good example of lymphatic ducts that is very useful, and we are going to be revisiting them when we get into the digestive system, will be the lacteals. The lacteals are specialized lymph capillaries that are present in the intestinal mucosa and is responsible it's actually the one where our body uses for absorbing fat. So here's like a diagram showing you the pathway of lymph. You have larger lymphatic vessels. These are your larger lymphatic vessels. Then you have your lymphatic capillaries. Then you have also your collecting vessels. The collecting vessels also are found along the underlying the skin itself. So the larger lymphatic vessels pretty much would help in emptying all of the collected lymph into back into circulation. The lymph capillaries drain into an increasingly larger collecting vessels, and these are made up of the vessel trunks and ducts, and they have structures and covers, tunics, that are similar to veins, except they have thinner walls and they have more internal valves. They do anastomose, and you could see it there. They're actually like anastomosing, and pretty much they are frequently they're actually like collecting vessels that are also found in the skin, and they travel also around the walls of blood vessels. Now here is actually a just a portion of the lymphatic circulation, and that is actually the thoracic area. Now, the lymphatic trunks, which are formed by the union of your largest collecting vessels, and these are the largest collecting vessels, which is actually in the torso, pretty much they are draining into the left subclavian vein. Now, pretty much you have, there you go, that's the right, and this is the left. Okay, you have the right and the left. So they do drain into the subclavian veins. The big lymphatic trunks are paired. You have a paired lumbar. You got your paired right and left lumbar. You have your bronchomediastinal, the subclavian, which is actually around this area. the jugular trunks, which is actually going from the neck, and then you have the intestinal trunk. And pretty much they all drain collectively into the subclavian vein. The lymph delivers, pretty much the lymph is delivered from the trunk, from the major trunk, and into two large lymphatic ducts. You have the right lymphatic duct, the right lymphatic duct, I wish I had it, the right lymphatic duct that drains the right upper arm and right side of the head and the thorax. The thoracic duct drains the rest of the body in about half of the individuals. It starts out as an enlarged sac. It drains into what you call the cisterna chyli. And let me show you where the cisterna chyli is. There you go. Just the thing that I needed. Okay, you have your cisterna chyli right there. And pretty much the cisterna chyli picks up most of the stuff, the lymph, and it drains it back into the left subclavian vein. I mean, the left trunk into the left subclavian vein. Is it really a very good, is the lymphatic system a very good system or a very good organ? Yes, it is, but just like any other organ, it could actually get some certain types of imbalances. One type of imbalance is what you call lymphangitis. It's a condition in which the lymphatic vessel would appear as painful red lines under the skin. And it is caused by inflammation of the larger lymphatic vessels that contain also the vasovasorum. The vasovasorum means it's actually the lymphatic fluid that goes around the blood vessels. The vasovasora becomes congested with blood. They're larger lymphatics, like blood vessels. They receive their nutrients from the branching vasovasorum. And how is your lymph transported? Oh, it doesn't have any, we don't have any lymphatic heart. Well, it is actually being transported through the contraction of muscles that are surrounding them. The lymph system is a low pressure system like the venous system. The lymph is propelled by mechanisms that is related to muscular activity. The physical activity would increase the flow of lymph. That's why early in the morning, when you feel sluggish and when you feel that you're bloated and you're inflamed, after 20 minutes of walking around and after 20 minutes of moving around, all of your lymph that is supposed to be in your interstitial or that has actually escaped your blood vessels and is now in your interstitial fluid will be collected back and will be sequestered back and returned into your subclavian vein. After that, moving you will be moving normally. You won't feel that you're being bothered by how you look and how you feel anymore because you will feel normal because your interstitial fluid is now back into circulation. There's another homeostatic imbalance which you call lymphedema. It is severe localized edema that is caused by anything that prevents the normal return of lymph to the blood. An example of this will be tumors that are blocking lymphatics or removal of lymphatics during cancer surgery, like when females have breast cancer and they're most of the mass around the breast area including lymph nodes will be removed, then that could pretty much like cause what you call lymphedema. Let's take a look at the lymphoid cells, the tissues that are involved here, and the organs. Lymphoid cells consist of immune system cells that are found in lymphoid tissue. and the supporting cells that form the lymphoid tissue structures. Our immune system cells are called lymphocytes. And there are two types of lymphocytes. You have the B cells and the T cells. The lymphoid cells, the B and the T cells, pretty much are protecting our body. So they protect us against antigens or that are foreign and it's not ours. The T cells manage the immune response. The B cells produce plasma cells, which eventually will be producing a substance which you call antibodies, which, if you will recall in our lecture on the plasma, is actually also a type of immunoglobulin. An immunoglobulin is actually present in the plasma, and your antibodies is actually released in the plasma by the plasma cells. Antibodies would be marking this foreign antigen for destruction by the phagocytes or by other means. The lymphoid cells are pretty much like not only one or two. There's plentiful. There are plenty of them. They're actually like our macrophages, our dendritic cells, and some supporting lymphoid cells, which you call the reticular cells. The macrophages would phagocytize foreign substance and would help activate T cells. The dendritic cells, this is your dendritic cells, would capture antigens and deliver them to the lymph nodes. And this will help also activate the job of the T cells. The supporting lymphoid cells, called reticular cells, they produce reticular fibers that is forming the stroma in lymphoid organs. And a stroma is actually a network-like support that acts as scaffolding for immune system inside your lymph node itself. If you do not have any reticular fibers, the, the then your lymph node will not have a stroma. It will just be a bag of cells inside it. It's not going to look like a kidney, but it is shaped like a kidney. It forms that particular shape simply because of the stroma that is produced by the reticular cells. So what is the main function of lymphoid tissue? Well, the lymphoid tissue itself houses and provides sites for proliferation of lymphocytes. So our lymphocytes are actually hard-working soldiers of the body. But if they are not there, if there's no war, and if there's no infection, and they are just resting, then they're just chilling in the hub. And their house really will be your lymph nodes. There are millions or there are thousands of lymphocytes in lymph nodes. And pretty much the only time that they're going to exit the lymph node is when there is actually a need for it, and they will be receiving signals. Um, and when they receive the signals, sort of like an alarm, then they are ready to go out and fight. And they know that they don't know because they don't have any brain. And we know that because they are fighting and they will be using up a lot of their energy, these blood cells can die in the process of defending us. They are largely made up of reticular connective tissue, which is actually the stroma of your lymph node. The macrophages live on these reticular fibers. They are inside, in between the reticular fibers. Um, Spaces between the fibers will offer a hub or a place for lymphocytes to occupy when they return from patrolling the body. That is, if they are not going to be killed. So there are two main types of lymphoid tissue. One type is what you call diffuse lymphoid tissue, and the other one is what you call nodular lymph glands. The diffuse lymphoid tissue will be just a loose arrangement of lymphoid cells and some reticular fibers, and you find them in virtually every body organ. There's a large collection that you find where you find them in the lamina propria of the mucous membrane. However, the nodular, the one that looks like nodes, you will or lymphoid follicles are also available, and you find them. Okay, these are the lymphoid. You find them in lymph nodes and tonsils. The lymphoid follicles, these are actually called lymphoid follicles, are nodular. They will have what you call a germinal center. Okay, they will have a germinal center, which is actually made up of proliferating B cells, and they may form. These are your germinal centers right there. Could see that there's actually a tinge of white. That's actually the germinal center of a lymphoid organ or a lymphoid nodule, which is actually made up of B cells. They may form part of a larger lymphoid organ or nodes. They can also be isolated aggregations of Peyer's patches of the small intestine and the appendix. So the nodular lymphoid organ is not only on the lymph node. There could be also in the intestines and the appendix. Lymphoid organs are grouped into two functional categories. The one is what you call the primary lymphoid organ, and the other one is what you call the secondary lymphoid organ. The primary lymphoid organ are organs where the T and the B cells would mature, which means this is actually the where the B cells and the T cells are born. Well, we all know that the bone marrow is pretty much where your blood cells are actually born. The B cells are born in the bone marrow, but the T cells are actually born and is going to gain immunocompetency in a gland which you call the thymus gland. The thymus gland is located right there. It is actually located on top of the heart, okay? And pretty much is only available to the human body, actively available to the human body from our birth until probably about 11 years old. It disappears. By that time, all of the microorganisms uh, that is needed really for the most part, you have been exposed already, because as a kid you'll be romping around and picking up all of those microorganisms as you are growing up, and that will it's what do you call this, it will stop growing and would atrophy a little bit into a small portion only in the uh, right after you turn 11 years old. So the B and the T cells pretty much like originate in the bone marrow, but the B cells mature in the bone marrow. They're left to mature there. The T cells will mature in the thymus gland. And these two areas, the bone marrow and the thymus gland, because this is where they are born and they mature, you call them the primary lymphoid organs. The secondary lymphoid organs are areas where mature lymphocytes would first encounter their antigen and become activated. Lymphocytes that have not been activated, which means they are naive, they don't know how a foreign antigen would look like, it means there's no exposure yet, are what you call naive. They don't know anything. However, once they have been activated, then they're not anymore naive. They can stay in the lymph nodes, and pretty much they are either wandering around in the bloodstream or they stay in the lymph nodes. So the Secondary lymphoid organs are found in the lymph nodes, the spleen, and the mucosa associated lymphoid tissue. And of course, along the different diffuse lymphoid tissue. Lymph nodes. Take a look at how much lymph nodes we have in our body, and this is not even showing the legs. We do have a lot of lymph nodes. These are the principal secondary lymphoid organs of the body, and there are hundreds of lymph nodes that are found throughout the body. Most are embedded deep in the connective tissues. Some of them are found in clusters, especially around the armpit and the breast area, around the groin area. Some are nearer to the body, most especially the ones in the inguinal and the cervical region of the body, where collecting vessels would converge into trunks. And the lymph nodes are actually known to be cleansing, a cleansing, what do you call this, a cleansing station. Those little lymph nodes that we have in our body, they're stations for the lymph to be cleansed. Most of the lymphs, once they have been sequestered back into circulation into the lymphatic vessels, will have to pass through the lymph nodes before they are returned into the bloodstream. They have to make sure that whatever they have collected in the blood or inside the lymphatic vessels will have to be filtered first of microbes. There could be foreign antigens there. If they have sequestered fluid that is coming from an inflamed part of the body, and that inflamed part of the body will have antigens, foreign antigens of microbes that cause the inflammation, then naturally, before you bring it back into circulation, you'll have to clean that particular fluid. And we need that fluid. We cannot throw away that fluid just because you found them right there within the battleground. No, that's not the way it is. This fluid that's been sucked up and has been sequestered back to get back into the blood will need to be filtered in the fluid itself. This is a cross section of your lymph node, and it shows the germinal centers, okay, of the lymph node. The capsule is the cover of the lymph node, and the medulla of the lymph nodes. This is actually the middle of the lymph node, which you call the medulla, and is made up of medullary cords. You could see that the arrangement of the cells here is in cord-like function. And right here you have germinal centers, and you call this uh, the follicles itself. And each of these follicles are actually divided into sub compartment, and the compartment is created by an invagination of a connective tissue, which you call the trabecula. All of this, most especially the ones that are in the germinal centers where you find the B cells, they offer a place for lymphocytes to become activated. They're actually like probably chilling there, waiting for fluid that's been reabsorbed by the lymphatic system to to carry to them foreign antigens. And once they realize that there's a foreign antigen around, then they become activated. They could either form antibodies against it, or they will go and fight. If they're T cells, they go and fight them in a cell mediated form or a cell mediated part. So let's take a look at the anatomy of the lymph node itself. I've been pointing to you in a picture, in a diagram, um, sort of like a rough histology of the lymph node it is. But this is actually a drawing. It's a diagram. It's too beautiful. So in the lab, you will be looking at pictures or diagrams of actual cross section of lymph nodes. You will see that the lymph node is actually made up of uh, compartments. So each compartment like this is what you call a lymphatic nodule. And that's the name right there. And each lymphatic nodule would be made up of a lightly colored or lightly staining area, which is called the part of the cortex, the lightly staining area, which is called the germinal center, and the cortex of the lymphatic nodule. The entire lymph node is covered by a capsule. It is each of these nodules are divided into compartments by a connected tissue membrane, which you call the trabecula. The capsule uh, covers the entire lymph node. There are vessels that would send lymph nodes, I mean fluid, lymphatic fluid into the lymph node itself, and that vessel is what you call the afferent vessel. That's actually an afferent vessel. This is another afferent vessel. This is another afferent. These are all afferent vessel. The fluid, after it has circulated inside and has been filtered and cleansed inside the lymph node, will now exit the lymph node through the efferent lymphatic vessel. It could go into the lymphatic vessel, into the thoracic vessel to be emptied back into the subclavian vein, or it could pass through again another lymph node for again refiltering. So it could be filtered several times in its travel or in its course back to the circulatory system. Now, in the cortex itself, right there, in the cortex, as well as in the medulla area, you will find B cells. Take a look at this. B cells reside in the cortex and the medulla. T cells mainly reside in the deep cortex only. An immune response can be generated if a foreign pathogen is detected by any one of this, and this foreign pathogen will be the ones that are coming from the fluid that is sucked into the organ itself. The lymph exits the lymph node via the efferent vessel. From the afferent vessel, where it gets into the lymph node, the lymphatic fluid is now going to go under the capsule. You call that area, there's actually a very thin space there, which you call the subscapular sinus. A sinus will be a space. So there are subscapular sinus. It fills the fluid that enters into the afferent vessel, fills the sinuses under the capsule. The lymph then enters or would now go into the medullary sinus and finally would exit into the concavity on the concave end, which you call the hilus of the kidney-shaped organ, and it will go into the efferent lymphatic vessels. Buboes. What are buboes? Well, I remember what a bubo is because I've heard about the bubonic plague. Now, buboes are actually inflamed. They're swollen, tender lymph nodes. And just like what I'm saying, the bubonic plague was named after this particular clinical feature, which is actually a symptom of the bubonic plague. That's why you call it bubonic plague, because one symptom is actually the formation or the inflammation of lymph nodes. Lymphoma. Lymph nodes can become secondary cancer sites if the cancer has metastasized and would become trapped in the node. It can actually like multiply there and can increase the size of the lymph node. This is a picture of a growing lymphoma of a person, of a man. He looks like a man. The spleen. The spleen is the graveyard of red blood cells, as we know it from our previous lecture. but it is also a lymphatic organ. It is a blood rich organ. It's about the size of the fist. It is located in the left side of the abdominal cavity, just below the stomach. The spleen is the largest lymphoid organ. It is served by the splenic artery and vein, which enters and exits at the hilum. It is a site of lymphocyte proliferation and immune surveillance and response. It cleanses the blood of aging blood cells, which means it kills aging blood cells. So it is called the graveyard of red blood cells and platelets. And pretty much it has a lot of splenic macrophages that would cleanse the area. So the spleen breaks down products of red blood cell, dying red blood cell or dead red blood cells. They also store blood, and the spleen is encased by a fibrous capsule. Histologically, the spleen is made up of two components. Now let me take a look at the second slide, the next slide. If we have something here that would show us its component, which you call the white pulp and the red pulp. There you go. This is a beautiful cross section of the spleen. It shows you the white pulp, the white pulp uh, right there, and the red pulp right here. So the white pulp is a site where the immune function would occur, usually in a tissue that's actually like stained by Wright stain or James's stain. It would be colored blue. It would look like this halo. This halo here, that's actually those halo right there. That halo there is called the white pulp. Why is it called the white pulp when it's colored blue? Well, we all know that the white blood cells have nucleus. And when you stain white blood cells, if you have lots of white blood cells around that area and you stain them, you will be staining the nucleus, the nuclei of these white blood cells. And that's actually the one that gives its character of bright blue or blue color. Meanwhile, around it, you will find something that would be colored pinkish or blue red. And that's actually what you call the red pulp. That red pulp is where the red blood cells are actually located. So you see something like a halo of blue cells around? That's the white blood pulp. That means it has lots of white blood cells. And the inside there and outside, you have something that's reddish. You find lots of red blood cells there. You call them the red pulp. The red pulp has also what you call splenic cords. They're made up of reticular tissue. It separates the blood-filled splenic sinusoids and the red blood cells. Now, inside it, you have also macrophages around this area. They are there to engulf or to break down the red blood cells that are actually destroyed. The spleen has a thin capsule, so a direct blow or a severe infection of the spleen may cause it to rupture. And if it ruptures, it will spill blood into the peritoneal cavity. And it would probably warrant the necessity of having what you call splenectomy or removal of the spleen. You will survive, humans have survived without the spleen anyway. All of the function of the spleen can be taken over by the liver. MALT, mucosa associated lymphoid tissues. These are lymphoid tissues in mucous membranes throughout the body. You find them in tonsils, You find them as Peyer's patches in the small intestine, and you find them also in the appendix. You find them also in the mucosa of the respiratory tract, the genitourinary organs, the digestive tract, which is called Peyer's patches. That's why you call them mucosa associated. Most of them are found in the mucosa of your digestive tract. Like this one here. This looks like a part of the small intestine, a cross section of the small intestine. And you see a lymphoid nodule right here. It's not really a nodule, but actually a lymphoid patch. You call this the Peyer's patch. Tonsils. How many tonsils do you think we have? Well, we have three tonsils that are large enough to be like appearing like they're nodules. And then you have also tubal tonsils. First, you have your palatine tonsils. The palatine tonsils, there's a pair of palatine tonsils that is located at the posterior end of the oral cavity. You would know it if you open your mouth, and it will be right there, two of them. Now, when we're growing, this becomes inflamed. Some of them would probably need to be removed. Some of them just need some tender, loving care. Lingual tonsil. These are lumpy collection of follicles at the base of the tongue. The lingual tonsil is somewhere around here. All right, right there, right there. That's the lingual tonsil. And then you have also the adenoids or the pharyngeal tonsil right around there. Together with the palatine tonsil, these are like two types of tonsils within the oral cavity that is constantly being bombarded by microorganisms, and most of the time they become a problem when they become inflamed and enlarged. It would probably warrant the removal of these two tonsils. The tubal tonsil, they surround the openings of the auditory tubes into the pharynx. And this is actually the entrance to the auditory tube. You find tubal tonsils around it. They're like Peyer's patches. They are patches only. Okay. What's the function of your tonsil? They are there to gather and remove pathogens in the food or in the air that we're breathing. The overlying epithelium would invaginate, which means they are actually forming holes like crypts, and you can trap particles there, and it can actually inflame. And you can see here the pus that's actually being formed in the crypts. Okay, they are these particular um, uh, these particular tonsillar crypts are smelly, but they are going to be like when you gargle, they're going to be going with the flow of the water, and you can actually like either spit it out, or accidentally you might just swallow it. It's not bad, all right? It's a lot of bacteria, but but this bacteria will be killed by your the acid in your stomach. Peyer's patches, and here is a cross section, beautiful cross section of your intestines. They are found in the distal portion of your intestine, small intestine, not large intestine. They look like nodules, right? But they are actually follicles, okay, of Peyer's patches. And they are also called aggregated lymphoid nodules. They are structurally similar to tonsils. They, according to their location, they are supposedly there to destroy bacteria that is already like bacteria that would be brewing right there at the distal end of your small intestine. The appendix. Right there is your appendix, guys. The appendix is an offshoot of the first part of the large intestine. It is right there, located at the base or at the distal, not the, okay, not really distal end. It's actually right there at the proximal end of the ascending colon. The ascending colon goes up. This is the beginning of the colon right there, and that's where at the cecum there's a pouch right there, which you call the cecum. You find a a pouch-like structure, like a finger-like structure. It's a pouch. It's actually filled with lymphoid follicles. The thymus gland. The thymus gland, just like what I've said in a few minutes ago, is located right there on top of the heart. It disappears when just about when we are about 11 years old. It is a bilobed organ found in the inferior neck of your the inferior neck area, and it functions as a lymphoid organ where T cells will mature. This is a cross section of the thymus. That's why scientists call it a gland, because physically, when they look at the thymus, it is lobular. It looks like it's a big gland, but actually, it's actually broken into lobules that contain also an outer cortex, okay, and an inner medulla. The thymus corpuscle, which you also call the Hassel corpuscle, would be inside this particular follicles right here, and they are corpuscle. Hassel corpuscles are where regulatory T cells develop. They help in the development of the regulatory T cells. The regulatory T cells are the types of T cells that would uh, prevent the uh, prolonging of an immune response. This means that if you get sick and your lymphocytes are actually all active, there will come a time when the war is over, which means you're already done, gone, good, so you're well. But your lymphocytes are still there. There has to be something that's going to stop the war. And the regulatory T cells are the ones that stops the war. It prevents the immune response from going any further than it should, because any further than it should, the lymphoid organs that are working will overwork themselves and will get killed. There's lots of lymphocytes that get killed in that war. The thymus differs from other lymphoid organs in that it has no follicles. It lacks B cells. It does not carry any V cells. The lymphocytes that are found in the thymus gland are only T cells. It does not directly fight antigens. It is actually T cells. Therefore, it could become, the T cells could mature into helper T cells or killer T cells. They do not form antibodies. So the stroma of the thymus gland is made up of epithelial cells. They are not reticular fibers. They provide an environment for the maturation of T cells. This is the end. And there's going to be an animation about the immune response, and this is really very good. This is also posted as a link in your lecture page. Make sure that you view it. Okay? Have fun, guys, and I'll see you in chapter 21.